Hello, everybody. This is Brooklyn Bound Podcast. I am your fearless host, Jason Treuting. I've started to say fearless host. I don't know why.
It's good.
I've started to say that. I think it came from code or somehow. These are my fearless guests.
Yes.
2/3 of Troika percussion sisters. On my left, Kasey Blezinger. I'm so worried about pronouncing names, and I know you, Kasey, and I know how to pronounce and Shelby Blezinger-McKay on my right. Welcome, you two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thanks for
to
making
you.
this happen. Welcome to me.
Welcome to you. You're
Yeah.
here.
It's true. You all are in the studio. There is a certain welcoming factor there.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I was just saying we have talked before. And so I want to point everybody to, we did an awesome Troika podcast when you all played on Brooklyn Bound series.
Mm-hmm.
Talked a lot about your history as a group and as players. And you guys played, it was awesome. You played some music of your own. You played some Fong music.
Yeah.
That was back.
It was virtual.
Yeah, in May. Yeah, you're right. When we were still doing the virtual, and that was when we released our first sort of official, I guess, original work.
Yeah.
And yeah, all the video of that was made by Fong.
Right.
Yeah, awesome.
And then we played our commission with Fong.
Yes.
Yeah.
The awesome typing. Yeah. I love, actually, everybody should watch that podcast, because talking to you all about the process of making your own music, hearing the two of you all talk about it in different but similar ways is really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah.
Have you been working like that still these days?
Well, we did get a grant with the Chamber Music America. It's a grant program. It was called Ensemble Forward. And for the year of 21, we basically were given funding to work with a coach, and it was very performance related, but also whatever you wanted to work with your coach on, you could do. And so we worked with Maria Finkelmeyer, and we did 2 sessions virtually with Maria, and we got really nitty gritty into just business and how to do whatever we need to try to do. And then we spent 2 sessions in person with her right before she had her beautiful baby, and she was such a trooper for doing that with us as 4 weeks out as she was.
Yeah.
And we did just 2 really intensive days with her, actually trying to figure out how to put this music in performative spaces, how to actually perform that music, which we didn't perform in the first place. We made it electronically performing on our own.
Yeah.
So the good news is it's progressed. And now I think we're just kind of waiting to feel out live performance that works for us. Being that we are kind of bi-coastal, we just want it to feel right and not oh, there's this possibility of cancellation or whatnot. Yeah, but the progress is there. It's exciting.
There is a show in the planning stages with significantly more, or I guess a little bit more fleshed out original music than we've presented so far. So
yeah, it's about 25 minutes worth original music.
Yeah,
and so title unknown.
Title unknown, because that's where
we're still there.
Not great at titles, but maybe hopefully in the fall or so we're going to start trying to have something to put on the ground, hopefully.
Whoa. That sounds amazing. That does sound like progress since.
Yeah, it was good.
So that was a project that, meaning it was made in the studio, so to speak. It was made, in your own spaces. And so now is the process of oh, we made it this way. We have to figure out how this is perform or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And just doing a lot of, when we were doing things in our homes, in our studios, in our closets, whatever, there was a lot of, we took a lot of liberties just being oh, I can process this, I can do this at the same time, and then I can process this. And now it was okay, so we can't actually do all those things within 6 minutes. How do we do all those things in 6 minutes or whatever?
It was a really interesting sort of we took it. It's we built up this thing to a finished version, released it, And then it's like we had to take that and then just start pulling it back apart almost immediately. It was like, okay, well, this works in this setting. It won't work as is in a live setting. Okay, so what were we wanting to keep as the through line? What are the things that like make sense to do live? Okay, take those out. Like that sort of which was and is very fun. It's really fun.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. I love that process. That resonates a lot with me as well. Trying to figure out what is the thing. So with this podcast, we're talking about this. I don't think I mentioned it. We have a show coming out February 5th. Saturday, February 5th. Very excited about it. It's gonna be percussion extravaganza marathon. Neon lights kind of vibe, and you all are playing a few things, but the main thing you're doing is this duo by Darian Donovan Thomas, Kid Gunner brother. And actually, is it right for me to say that there is some strange similarity in terms of you recorded this piece before now you're playing it live? You did a recorded version first, right? So I was putting out an album of Darian's music. We'll be playing some of a piece he wrote for us called Individuate. And this duo is on the album too. So what, tell us about the process of putting this piece together and I guess transitioning into what your live version of the piece is.
Well, so you just jump in whenever. Kid Gunner Brother is, for anyone that doesn't know it, it's a hand clapping game telling the story, and Darian telling a story that he experienced, which is telling his brother all about the KKK and racist systems in America, because his brother was telling him he would like to get a gun to protect the family from organizations like ISIS. And I would imagine this was back in like the mid 2000s when the story is taking place. So that was like the beginning of, a lot of the talk about ISIS for, I think, our generation and just slightly younger, which is, I think, where Darian and his brother might fit in. But it uses these like childlike elements, like a hand clapping game, which we certainly grew up doing, to tell the story that is very serious. But also, we were talking about this last week. It's a very serious story, but it's also like the same kind of conversations siblings have with each other when they're younger, about like just trying to like maybe like correcting them or just being like, oh, like you just don't know what this means yet to a younger sibling or something. Like the way those conversations happen where there's no anger involved, there's no like malintent. It's just siblings talking to one another about things, and sometimes you don't know how serious they are, but you do at the same time. Whereas maybe if you're having that conversation with an adult, like a young child to an adult, it might be sugar-coated in ways, or adults having these serious conversations might cause tensions. So there's a lot of that at play. And
even like that way that children and adolescents, and like this was certainly our experience growing up with our older brother included, that way that like you take in so much information that like kind of means nothing to you. Like you take, like even as kids, you hear the news, you hear what adults talk about, but at the like it really doesn't mean much. It's mostly just words, because like you can't understand fully the layering, the history, what it means in a big thing. And so like the way that kids just sort of like filter through and talk about the things that they hear, like sort of just trying to like rationalize like what are these things that like the adults around me seem very affected by. And like exactly what you're saying, it's like they can and often will like talk about very serious topics very flippantly, because it's just like, of course you do. Like, because how else do you
remember? He the first time I heard the piece, he wrote the piece for a couple of associate students, and they played it either at Small World or at the Record Exchange. It was like one of those situations. I mean, I know they played both, but like I don't know. Yeah, I remember the Record Exchange for sure. And you're watching this thing happen and you're like, wow, this is really sweet. Like, this is pretty slick. I know this is probably gonna be really good. Like, oh, Pizza Hut, like what's happening in a Pizza Hut? You know, it's really like, and then all of a sudden you're like, I think because everybody's in such a happy and jovial mood, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Well, wow, you know, it's really, I think Darian does that in general in a really great way. But this piece to me was like super striking like that. I imagine you had a similar experience watching it the first time, it sounds like, but I imagine playing it, you just get so many more of those layers.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, we literally every time we rehearse it, we realize like sometimes we'll be laughing about us getting like mixed up, or you know, we, like I said, I think we both grew up doing hand clapping games.
Yeah.
So sometimes like we'll naturally just like, actually the beginning, the first time we worked on this, we were recording it, and we were really trying to make sure that all of the sounds we were getting were sounding great, and that like it was going to come across, like you were going to hear the differences between snaps and claps and like hitting the back and front of the hands. And we were being really meticulous about the sounds, which I think in the long run is really helpful for when you do it live, of course. But there were some times where we took liberties saying, okay, you know what, for sound purposes, I might need to learn this a different way. And we would learn things we would make decisions about how it felt intuitively because of these hand clapping games we've done before. And so we've had to flip it and reverse it a little bit to do it live. But we would kind of joke about the things we would do intuitively or make a mistake because we would just naturally go somewhere and then realize like the things we're saying are not like necessarily like in a joking manner. So there is like direct juxtaposition about like the fun that everyone experiences playing hand clapping games versus the conversation being had.
Yeah, I feel like I missed maybe I just grew up in a super gendered space, or maybe just my friends didn't. I don't know. I never did the hand clapping thing, and I've only done it. My two girls definitely still do hand clapping games, and they kind of do the same ones that Beth grew up doing or whatever, you know. And so I'll try to learn them and and it's really fun. But so can you show us? I know you probably don't have the music around, but like, so what if somebody's coming to Roulette? Like, so how does this? What are they going to see at first, or like, what's the hand clapping vibe?
Oh, you want to just do like the first?
Oh, you do have it there. Yes.
Yeah.
Extra credits.
Always ready.
Lovely. Right. Amazing. I was thinking we were going to put it like in the style of.
Let's just do the first phrase. Like,
perfect.
Measure in half.
Okay. Ready.
Yeah. 2, 3, 4. I remember my brother told me once at a Pizza Hut. I remember my brother told me once at a Pizza Hut. I remember my brother told me once. Okay, so that's the first part. Yep.
Awesome.
Pats, some foot stomping. It's like.
And snaps.
Yeah, snaps. Which, the differences are hard.
This right here is rude.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't call my left hand snaps out this hard.
My right hand can't snap.
Yeah, it's so quiet.
Yeah. But it's so styling. The way it happens is so cool. It's so like kind of like, it's got flair, you know?
Yeah, and eventually we do get into some of this stuff.
Which, oh yeah.
Yeah, we do some of this. We do whatever that. But like lots of this. Back padding.
Lots of that.
I think it's a really cool layer, for me at least, to know that you all are sisters, and then to know that you grew up doing these games. It's kind of really cool. Like when I heard the piece at first, I think I imagined that Darian and his brother are further apart in years. I imagine the way he's like, it feels like he's giving his brother advice.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I think that's right.
Yeah. But I kind of love that, like, I can imagine, you know, you two growing up doing this kind of vibe or whatever. Like, it's very cool. It's very, very cool.
And it's funny because it's like, this absolutely is not the intention of the piece, but just like we do have a brother, he is older than us, this still makes sense.
Yeah.
Like going through the inverse of like our experiences of growing up with our one brother is older than us, and like, as you can imagine, sometimes hearing a teenage boy say something and just being like, that is the dumbest thing you could have ever said to me.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? That it's like, this still works. Like,
I love that.
It still can work.
I haven't met your brother, but you're really throwing him under the bus right now. I love it. I would throw my brother.
Honestly,
it's because we love him and he's the best.
But also, he would, if he does see this, Drew is probably sitting there just being like,
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Teenage boys, right?
Yeah.
So am I right? I'm thinking about the piece. Does this feel right? Not that people watching this need to have the same takeaway, but it feels pretty clearly the takeaway is like, cool. So you're thinking about getting a gun. That's kind of stupid. But if you are, maybe it shouldn't be because of ISIS. Maybe it's because there's a lot of shit that's pretty messed up right here, a lot close to home.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's a lot happening close to home vibe, but also the main reason the brother says he wants to get a gun is to protect the family. And it's I think what Darian is trying to convey is like there's a lot of people like right in our backyard that are, you know, are people that could harm us in, you know, in America. And
through a racial lens too. I mean, he says
through a racial lens.
Absolutely.
And so I think what he's trying to convey in this conversation is like your thoughts about protecting the family are important, but maybe you're not necessarily focused on what is right here. And also they don't really go into the conversation about the gun, but it's like, is a gun like really the best way where, you know, knowledge is power. And I think Darian's giving that knowledge in this conversation.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different conversations, of course, in this very short hand clapping game, not like fully fleshed, but those concepts are there.
Get a lot of that. Yeah.
An interpretation that I've sort of been sitting with a lot on top of everything that you said, which is dead on, is kind of from like a wide lens angle, thinking about like the silliness of being in a chain pizza restaurant with like an 11-year-old who's going to be what, 6-ish grade or so, and like thinking like the idea that I keep coming back to is sort of like how conditioned we are to like kind of see that situation almost normally here, which you know, everyone can have their interpretations on, but like the almost like boring manner in which a very young child articulates an understanding and a need for a firearm is like something that is like kind of sat with me. Like the way that this story like on its face is so like uninteresting. It happens constantly over and over and over again. Like it just is the reality that especially as Americans we live in. But like when you take a step and a half back from it, you're just like, a child that can't leave math class to go to the restroom without asking permission at the exact same time is saying like, for us to be safe, what has to happen is like, I have to be the one that takes on like a violently dangerous situation. And it's just like, that's actually really horrifying to kind of think about.
That's totally horrifying. Hey, Emily Motherwell.
Sorry.
Welcome to our podcast. I was late and it's my fault.
No worries.
Is this for Brooklyn Bound?
It is. Just say, hey, I love it. You may be our first pop-in.
I'm so glad that it's after I've just gotten out of the shower and I'm like,
I love it. You're our first cameo. We're gonna wrap up in 1 second.
I'll pop out. Shelby, text me when.
Sounds good.
Emily.
Emily.
I love it. This is such this time. I was talking to Andy and Victor the other day, and Beth is rushing in to teach, and so I zoomed to another part of my house, and then Elsie comes up to say hey, because she's like, "What's going on here?" You know, and it's like, oh. And then Beth's parents walk in. It was like, because it was just madness. It was madness.
I love
that. I do want to ask you one or two other quick questions, but Kasey, you saying that, I never thought about it that way. And it feels so American, I think, is what you're like. You could imagine another version where somebody's like, I need to get a superpower to save my family from this terrible thing, or I need to build a castle to save my family, or like something, or I want to, but it's like, I want to buy a gun.
Because it's kind of the same thing. It's like, especially like thinking like through like you have kids, you can sort of like kind of think about this, like the mental process and like the mental gymnastics sometimes children have to go through to understand things. Like, I think it's semi-safe to say that at that age bracket, like this might as well be like a child trying to interpret aliens attacking. Like, you're gonna be seeing this, like all you can really interpret is like fear and danger, and that it affects the adults around me.
Well, think about it. I mean, I don't know their age difference, but like for us being in 5th and 4th grade when 9/11 happened, and then from then on, from 2001 to today, like the most like kind of triggering word in America is terrorist. And that's why this conversation, I think, is happening, is like no one is talking anymore about the KKK or all these entities that are actually attacking America still to this day in ways.
Or it's like the thing, the thing that people look at fifth. Like, we have to rule out all the other things before we'll ever even entertain the idea that something bad happened here by our own people. And it's like, it's not out of like the realm of understanding of why, like, Americans are people that sort of are privy to the history of just the US, especially within the last 20 years. Like, it's not weird that it's shaken out this way, but it's like, it is sort of intentional. Like, the way that like the stories and the narrative of like who we're supposed to be afraid of is like, it wasn't made by accident. So it's like having this idea of like an 11-year-old's talking about ISIS the way that like we were trying to understand adults saying the words Al-Qaeda around us. Like, it's exactly like a one-to-one. Like, it's just the ball that keeps moving. It's just the ball that keeps rolling.
No, that's thanks for sharing all of that. I mean, it kind of maybe, I think we already had this conversation before on podcast, but I always end kind of asking about, like, this is such an intense time in terms of pandemic, but then most of the pandemic dealing with this larger conversation about equity or racism or anti-racism or these systems that we're talking about, where I think that thinking of things less externally and more internally. So with you two or with Paulina too and Troika, I don't know, any updates since the last time we talked to you, I guess, like how have you been processing this as artists or thinking through things or taking on a piece like this? Has it informed, or have you thought more about what it means to take on a piece like this at this moment?
I feel like that's a big question.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so as like a trio, us three, we really dug apart the idea of what it means, like, as artists to present pieces that are important to us, but also are, actually like giving people a space giving women a space, giving people of color a space, giving things like that thought, and really deep diving what that means to us. And I feel like in the summer, we really decided that it's important to us not to really like, it's important for us to realize that like who we're presenting, we've had thoughtful conversations about why we enjoy the music and why we want to share it, but also we find no reason of why we should have to explain it to anybody. So something we were really noticing that people are going through in this time in the past couple years is just like making concerts explicitly for women or for someone who has been left out of the conversation. And we find those concerts really important, but we're just going to do that. And we're not going to explain to the audience why we're doing that, because what we want is it to not necessarily be a tokenizing feeling anymore. To have a concert of just women or just non-binary or just people of color. What we want to do is just like, we're doing that. And we want that to just start to become like, that's what people are caring about and doing. So that was a conversation. I think we're still like trying to suss out how to talk about that. But I think we've both experienced tokenism in our own places. And so for us, it was like, how can we just keep doing what we love to do and also make space for people that haven't had it. So that's maybe the Troika side of things. I will say probably mentally I'm in a healthier place since the pandemic started, and when we last talked a year ago, I think a year ago, I won't speak for everybody, but it was questionable like what artistry really does for people. Like, does it actually matter when like your systems aren't like protecting those people? I think it's obvious that it does matter, because it creates our literal culture. America doesn't have a centralized culture, but we have pieces of lots of people's culture coming in. And I think for me, like the resurgence of actually seeing people like put into place things that they worked on and how they changed the pandemic, whether it was TV or a concert or art, was really valuable once I could finally take part in those places again, besides TV, which has always been something like chugging along through the pandemic. But yeah, so I think I'm in a healthier place about it. I still want to find like where the value is. And I know for me, I'm really being cautiously optimistic about performative art, and just not taking it for granted and not believing that the system is going to protect me in any way. And that's a dark place to live, but like just coming to terms with it is where I think I'm going to sit. But yeah, I think like doing a piece like this and one of the first live performances back for me is, I think the juxtaposition of like something so happy like a game and a serious conversation that is still so relevant today, is not ironic. It's not maybe coincidental in this way of like, it's wonderful to be playing again, and I'm grateful and sharing a serious conversation that I'm sure people will find themselves being like, I had this conversation as a child, somewhat similar, or a version of, or wow, this is still the conversation.
That's cool. It's kind of like the duo is a microcosm of those two things. It's like there's a joy to it.
I just talked for a while, but I'm like spinning through.
Oh, it's great, Shelby. It's great. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely I agree, especially on the Troika side, like of everything that Shelby just said. Like that's been I would say a pretty significant conversation we've been having recently, where pretty much since we've been a formed group and we've been talking about composers we want to play and the types of shows we want to do, it's sort of always been explicitly our mission that we want to intentionally perform the works of other women, people of color, non-binary people, largely every group that isn't cis, heterosexual, mostly wealthier white men within the classical music scene, because especially in percussion, most of us got out of our entire schooling experience able to count on one hand how many women we had played music by.
Or played under.
And
learned from.
And
yeah.
like, we've sort of, and it's been like this ongoing progression where it's just like, this is intentional, this is part of the point, while also like, I personally have a hard time doing that thing of like, okay, we're putting a show together. This is what the show looks like. We now have to pitch it to people. The last thing that I want to do is have to go, a program of entirely marginalized composers, because that's the thing that organizational classical music scenes, like, they're just like, oh, good, that'll look good on our program for the season.
Yeah.
And like, to me, I'm like, if that's what it takes for you to care, then we're not for you. I would rather be somewhere else. And to me, like, the last couple of years, as like someone within the art scene, as someone we've witnessed so much kind of go down in the art scene, the little bit of like extra nihilism, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Like, it is, like, it's pretty revolting what we've seen is acceptable in terms of the lack of care that like our just country at large will provide to its people, and that is true in every iteration possible, and including the arts sector. However, seeing so many of our peers, and I think of us included, sort of reach the point of, oh, so if you're not going to really care or help to begin with, I guess that means I can make what I've been wanting to make this whole time. So I'm just going to go make that thing that I've been making this whole time, because turns out after you spend 2.5 years only being able to cultivate an audience or a following or peers on the internet, what you learn is there's a lot of people like you. There's a lot of people that like the kind of art that you like and you're inclined to make. But when your entire vantage point for like the pre-pandemic times of trying to get shows on is through the lens of the very conservative sort of classical music box, you can start to lie to yourself that the thing that your instinct is to make doesn't have an audience, because that's what you get told. Because no, maybe you don't have an audience at, you know, this concert series in this town for like that group that tends to come to those shows. But like what we've really been able to learn in a way that like is, I think is absolutely undeniable, is like, oh, those audiences are there, and that audience base is not small. And what people want is things that are unique, that they've never seen before, or just ideas that have been presented in a different way. Like spending 2 years only on the internet, like people are literally like grasping for anything that they haven't seen before. And it's like, nope, we're sure not getting much help as artists, but we weren't getting a ton of help to begin with. So you might as well just make that thing that you've been wanting to make this whole time, because turns out like there's people for that. Like there's audiences for that.
That's a weirdly, I mean, very dark, but weirdly cool silver lining. Like, no, I mean, do what you do. And this has proved that there are people that want to see what you and everybody else does. There's an audience for everyone. It's a weirdly positive spin.
Listen to a group of millennials like complain about everything and its dog getting rebooted into a new thing, and you'll hear a group of people desperate for something they haven't seen before.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. usually our last question, although you've answered this one already, I think is about live performance. And I'm realizing, I think kind of the way you talked about it, Shelby, about playing this piece live again is a kind of, maybe we'll have to talk after the show and hear about how everybody's experience during the show. I think we're all excited for this one, and excited that you all are joining us and so many other folks are joining us. And thanks for making time this morning to chat.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I had so many, I wish I had the cartoon bubble. There were so many eye-popping moments of like, wow, I haven't thought about the piece that way. Or I really appreciate you all sharing about the scene right now.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
It'll be a fun show.
It shall be a fun show, Shelby. It shall be a fun show. February 5th, Roulette. There are also tickets to stream it if you can't make it out to New York, or if you're feeling, hesitant about COVID stuff. We respect that, and you can watch it online or come join us. We're going to have a lot of fun. Starts at 6 because it's a marathon, and it'll be so much fun. Good to see you, Kasey. Good to see you, Shelby.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. See you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.